I'm sure as you're building your community, you've been confronted with a lot of anxiety provoking situations. What are some of the things that you've come across in the work that you've been doing in building, your approach to creating your business and your life?
Pretty much all of being an entrepreneur has been full of anxiety for me. Um, Sometimes more than others, sometimes are very easy and whatever, and things are going great. Other times, I'm thinking constantly about how to grow the community, um, how to make sure that I'm saying the right thing and not hurting anybody in the process. There's a lot, thinking about advertising. We were talking earlier about like DIYing my advertising if I'm going to do advertising for the community. So a ton of it has been anxious, but I also try to stop and realize like this is something that's supposed to bring joy to me, and I'm making it something that's not joyful. So I really try to stop myself in those moments and try to make it something joyful, because if I'm doing this thing out of being anxious and stressed and trying to make it bigger, it turns into something that's not beautiful. And the whole core of this community is that it was beautiful and that it was natural and that other people resonated with it. So I think making sure that you don't take the joy out of what you're doing by having too many goals or being so set on it. I get so set on goals that like it's all I see and all I talk about, which is, I mean, such a waste of time in some ways, right? Like I could get hit by a car tomorrow and my family would be like, all we talked about was your work for the past few weeks that you were here on earth. Like I don't want that to happen. I want to be present and find joy in my life and not just be like so focused on building something. Because even if you're super focused on it and you do all the right things, it doesn't turn out the way you want it to anyway. So I really want it to be kind of free flowing. I don't know if I answered your question either, but
You did. Keep going.
I was just going to say, let's all fight anxiety together. Let's all, because it's that message too of climbing to the top, get to the top, be better, be enough, be bigger. And while I do want the community to grow, I don't want those thoughts in my head every day.
Yeah, especially when, you're building something that's meant to help people, right? Same with career
Mm-hmm.
therapy. Like this is meant to be a helpful, inviting space. And you see
Mm-hmm.
people taking it to extremes, right? You see people saying, if you're
Mm-hmm.
not doing this, if you're not loving yourself in this way, then you're not loving yourself right. And it's like, whoa,
Mm-hmm.
like you're just adding
Yeah.
additional pain to it. And
More work.
exactly, more work. It's everything has to be a strategy session, and everything has to be,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, a goal. When in reality, it's like we need to just kind of ride the anxiety as a,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes anxiety is a motivator, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily always. It's one thing I'm learning, and this is because I tend to be someone who avoids, like, or who gets very overwhelmed by emotion.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone out there has read the Enneagram personality test, I'm a
Mm-hmm.
9, which is just like,
You're the peacemaker.
yeah. And what are you?
8. I'm an 8. I'm
Yeah.
a challenger.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. And like one of the things that it says in when I read that it calls me out on, it says, you have to get in touch with your anger because you're so quick to
Mm.
just smooth everything over. And what I'm realizing is like, oh, right. Yeah. I try to avoid anger because I don't want to get flooded with that. And then,
Mm-hmm.
make people, you know, come off as like attacking people or something. And in my job, which
Mm-hmm.
is, career coaching, I have to always be very pleasant around people and things like that. And so it's interesting to use it and to lean into it, but then lean into it in the proper way, which is like, use
Mm-hmm.
it as a guide. Why are you angry?
Mm-hmm.
Not just be angry, but why and what's it telling you? And I think with anxiety, it's like, why are we
Mm-hmm.
anxious and what's it telling us?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it can be really revealing.
Mm-hmm.
What are maybe some of the things, because you've been taking some pretty interesting steps in building your community and building your career of traveling the country and doing some really fascinating things. What are some of the experiences that you've had that have had the biggest impact on you as you've been putting together this community?
Honestly, I just think the building of it, the beginning of it was very impactful. So impactful that it sparked this whole community. Um, Man, I don't know. I've really been influenced by people that have found so much joy in it and so much confidence in it. That's the most inspiring thing to me. I was recently talking to a guy and he was like, yeah, you're like an influencer. Like, let's start getting you like influencer packages and like you can promote people's products. My following isn't giant on social media, but it's growing. And he was just saying like, we can do this stuff. And I was like, no, like this is not me putting on a piece of clothing and selling it. It's a very sacred space for me. And I think that that's been a beautiful way to look at it, is that I don't have to fit the mold of an influencer. By selling stuff again to women. Like clearly I'm selling stuff, right? To fund this project and this community, like t-shirts. But I think just really have been inspired by keeping this a sacred space. It doesn't have to turn into anything that's influencer-ish.
Right. And being very mindful of it, and also using your skills
Yeah.
to have other streams of income so that you don't have to put so
Mhm.
much pressure on the sacred spaces that you're building.
Yes.
It kind of, I don't know, it brings to mind, as we talk about influencers, obviously the biggest influencers in the world right now, the
Mhm.
Kardashians, right? They've just
Oh
gone
gosh.
through a bunch of very interesting things in the last week. I don't know if you see or follow
I
any of that.
please tell me. I'm interested. Does it have to do with Khloe Kardashian posting about beauty
Yeah.
standards? Okay, I haven't
Yes.
been following it, but I've heard some opinions on it.
Yeah, I've heard many opinions on it. And, as someone who's a nine, I'm always just trying to be in the middle of it, but in the middle of the
Mhm.
opinions. But I do think it's interesting because basically the call out there, I think, from cynical people is you created the beauty standards that everyone's holding themselves to. And now that a picture
Mhm.
was leaked that wasn't photoshopped, and
Yes, but she looks so good in it, so I don't
she
know what
still
the
looked
issue
good in
is.
it.
Just
Right.
saying. Yeah.
It's like, but it wasn't up to the body standards that
Yes,
they set for themselves and the media.
exactly.
And so it's like you want to empathize, but you're also like, but you're part of creating this cycle.
Mhm.
And so it's a very interesting and confusing place,
Mhm.
I'm sure, for them as well to be in.
Mhm.
Because all of them are going to get older.
Mhm.
Like that's the truth of it all is. And I like earlier how you called out, we could get hit by a bus tomorrow,
Mhm.
right? This could all be over by the end of the day
Mhm.
if some accident happens.
Mhm.
So why are we spending every moment of every day setting goals or working or doing things that are not also leading to positive connections with other people, great,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
experiences with the people around us, right? We're almost sort of
Mhm.
sacrificing what really brings, the feelings that we want into our life in order to chase things
Mhm.
that we think might bring those feelings in. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Mhm. Yes, and I think social media has a huge part to play in that, right? Like many people are presenting themselves as different than who they really are on social media. This also brings up the conversation of work-life balance. Like, how do you balance a good, happy life and meet all your goals and work and like not sacrifice family time and all of that? And I'm still figuring that out. Like, that's a hard thing. It's not easy to do, um, especially when you have such big goals. Like, how do I not be consumed with this when I'm babysitting my niece and nephew? My huge to-do list, how can I be present with them instead of thinking about my to-do list? And I'm still trying to figure it out. But honestly, things like EFT tapping help with that. It helps with releasing some of those things and clearing that energy out of anxiety or having to live up to an image or whatever it is. It helps you slow down a little bit. I think I need to learn to slow down, clearly. Um, it might be because I'm an 8, Enneagram 8, jumping into things,
Yeah.
charging forward. But yeah, and honestly, like the Kardashian thing, I don't blame them. They were born into, even more so than someone like me, into a system like this sort of LA plastic surgery, perfect body standard. I don't blame them. I don't agree with them either. Um, but I think they're victims in a way of the same system that we all are. Just to go back to that really quickly to say that I don't blame anybody who's struggling with body image or not knowing how to say the right thing, because it's this shit show in general. Like, this whole thing that we've created is a mess.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate you sharing your story as you're also learning it and going through it.
Mm-hmm.
It's always important for us to call out that we're not therapists and we're not trained, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also really important to say that we are experts in marketing and branding and messaging
Mhm.
and things like that,
Mhm.
especially you. And being able to say, like, from my experiences with this knowledge that I have of how things
Mhm.
work, here's what I'm learning and here's what's working. And being
Mhm.
honest about when things aren't working, and being honest about,
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
struggles along the way, because the image, even when we try to be honest online, the image is always skewed because people don't see everything,
Mhm.
right? And so I really appreciate what you're putting out there. Is, if there was one thing that you'd really want people to just start thinking about after listening to this episode, what do you think it would be?
Mm. My biggest thing is to think about all the things that are wasting your time that don't need to be wasting your time. Like, as women, we spend our entire lives from being babies to adults constantly consumed with what we look like. Um, should we get Botox? We have wrinkles. Is our hair okay? We just got it dyed. It might not be right. Our skin, like, we're so consumed with things that don't matter in the end. And it's such a waste of our potential and our lives. Instead of being consumed with your boobs, maybe start a community, or instead of being consumed with climbing the ladder of success, which many successful rich people tell you there's nothing at the top of the ladder. There's nothing up there. So instead of being consumed and wasting our whole life striving so hard, I think we need to slow down and talk to people and connect with people and to build meaningful things that sustain us.